Firstly, a big shout out to Asdin of Grinning Wolf Games, who has worked with us to write this one. Published by Lightning Games and developed by Bling Game, HAAK was originally released in early access on Steam. Much like buses, you get no Metroidvanias for a while and suddenly two potentially very good ones come along in the same week. But is this one a cyberpunk Metroidvania masterpiece, or will it leave you feeling hacked off? Well, let's find out. HAAK lives in a dystopian world where the remnants of humanity struggle to survive. While weathering the sandstorms, rogue AI and the crazed group of wastelanders, he's on a quest to find his older brother whose whereabouts is unknown. His search will see him encounter friends and foe alike, and things get interesting when he finds a watch. Suddenly, an individual known as TR8 or Trait contacts you via the newly found watch, and in a classic case of quid pro quo, HAAK soon becomes entangled in a game of espionage while following the clues to his brother's whereabouts. The narrative is paced evenly, with conversations unveiling more about the protagonist and the desolate world he inhabits. We don't know much about what's caused the world to end up in this state, but there are enough snippets of lore scattered around via newspaper clippings and conversations with locals that you can fill in the gaps yourself. There are obvious influences from Blade Runner and Wasteland, particularly in terms of the setting, and the protagonist is the archetype of the younger sibling, having much to learn and grow, but whose heart is in the right place. There are a few Easter eggs and cameos, as well as moments which may break the fourth wall, but it's not too overt in this regard. The only real issue with narrative delivery is some of the translations. There are a few direct translations which just don't work in the English language. Thankfully they're few and far between, but when they pop up they do tend to break the immersion a little. Gameplay-wise, it's a 2D Metroidvania with a high emphasis on platforming. The protagonist will gather powers that will open up new pathways, as you'd expect from the genre, and there are also some side quests that reward with much needed cash. It's similar in this regard to games like Hollow Knight, but even the recently reviewed Islets, with a similar balance between traversal and combat. HAAK will unlock a hook during the opening hours of the game, which acts as a multi-tool of sorts. He can grapple to specific spots in the environment, allowing for smooth traversal a la Spider-Man, and if things get too tense, the right stick can be used to pause time, allowing you to aim the hook with more precision. Carrying this out will also display the connections between the many contraptions and their respective switches. I found this to be very helpful as it streamlined the pacing significantly, rather than carrying out the trial and error gymnastics so common with these games. Now, some sections require him to escape an area, and running through corridors and firing the hook to make haste is thrilling. I never felt in my over 15 hours of gameplay that the platforming was unfair or too easy, and the stages have been cleverly designed to keep the Cape Ninja moving at a swift speed. It's all about how well you time your actions. The hook also becomes part of your offensive arsenal. Every enemy close to the player will have a diamond symbol above their heads, and when that changes colour, you'll be in range to land a hit. An equally useful quality of life aspect of the hook is that upon defeating an enemy, they'll drop tiny shards that fill a first aid kit, which the player can then use by holding the R shoulder button. As far as difficulty goes, well, each time you perish, you'll earn green coins which can be spent at Genie's vending machine. These will offer shields, currency conversion to actual money, which you can also then use to upgrade your abilities, and in some instances, debuff a boss so they're easier to defeat. Each map is of a decent size and it's relatively easy to navigate, and while it doesn't completely mitigate backtracking, it seems to have found a good balance of exploration as well as treading past ground. By focusing on traversal to be more about platforming, it at least makes it entertaining when you have to do that. There are also hidden walls everywhere, with all those tasty treats to be found. These vary from CDs that unlock more upgrades, developers' notes on how to play and so on, and the world is dotted with toilet cubicles to save your progress. And once you've used the bog once, well, you can teleport to all the others. Well, how do you think that works? Do you think they flush themselves down? Wow. Controls do the job just fine, with a few traversal tricks, like the slicing uppercut performed near a ledge in order to grab onto it. As far as issues, well, at times it was hard to quickly get through some of the tight spaces, mainly due to the protagonist holding onto the ledges and it being a little fiddly to get off. Another issue was the game's frame rate would nosedive, but we have spoken to the developer about this one, and there's quite a simplistic fix, and they are aware of it. We'll talk about it more in the performance section. Gameplay for the most part is addictive, well designed and challenging enough, and as it is right now, it gets 16 out of 20. That would be even higher if it didn't have the performance dips. Controls are generally slick, and touchscreen features available in handheld mode level it up that little bit. They score 18 out of 20. Now firstly, let's get this performance issue out of the way. Randomly, and I mean completely randomly because 90% of the time the game ran at 60 frames per second, performance would suddenly drop down. Now having spoken to the developers, it seems there's an issue which was a complete oversight on their part. Essentially, to fix this 90%, you need to lower the in-game resolution to something like 82.5%. There's an option for this in the menu, but as you can expect, there's a patch already in the works to fix this automatically. In terms of visuals, HAAK's pixelated style is one of the most unique and aesthetically pleasing I've seen in a while in a 2D game. The clever use of parallax backgrounds, fog and blur effects, combined with a choice of color palette and some dynamic ambient lighting effects to really give the somewhat archaic visual style its own flair. The amount of detail on the billboards, which range from worn-out adverts to communist-style portraits, is really quite impressive. Even at the points when HAAK is experiencing lucid dreams, it does impress how something that mimics the 16-bit pixelated style can still offer some awesome surprises. The downside really is the aforementioned frame drops. Also, there are numerous keypads that require a 4-digit code. In handheld mode, you can just tap on the screen, but in docked mode, it was hard to distinguish the selected numbers. The soundtrack doesn't fall short either. The developers focused on adding it where applicable in order to create an ambience. This is reminiscent of the Metroid series, which also has atmospheric tunes and fast-paced songs which elevate the excitement, particularly during tense moments. There are many acoustic songs which work in unison with some of the visuals to create a real sense of otherness. As with all subjective things, the visuals won't be to everyone's liking, especially in a world where similar games like Blasphemous or the Ori series do things a little differently, but for my tastes as a cyberpunk fan, I think they've nailed the atmosphere. It's just a shame about those performance issues. Currently, visuals score 17 out of 20. The music and sound effects are implemented nicely, with a mixture of genres kicking in when applicable. Audio scores 18 out of 20. The game costs £16.59, or your regional equivalent, and it's only a 413 megabyte download. Eyelet has left the chat. You'll find multiple endings, a decent story, and a combination of tight controls as well as quality of life mechanics. For a nice relaxed pace, you could go from 15 to 25 hours, but if you're rushing, obviously you could do it faster, that's always the way. As with the other recent Metroidvania we reviewed, the price does seem a little high for the genre, and we just shouldn't mention Hollow Knight really, it's unfair to everyone. When it's all patched up, value would easily be a 17 out of 20, but as it stands right now, I think value scores 15 out of 20. HAAK is a great example of what an indie developer with passion and a willingness to take in the feedback can do. Invigorating a tried and tested genre and adding their own spices into the mix has really turned this game into a gripping Metroidvania that, even with its flaws right now, shouldn't be missed by anyone. This was reviewed by Asdin. We didn't know what each other were going to score the game, but we've managed to both score these two Metroidvanias 84%. A thanks to him for writing this one and for working with me on it on such short notice. Please do let him know in the comments what you thought of the review. And as always, just a big thanks for watching the channel. If you want to save 10% on any of these games, use code SwitchUp over at switchup.gg if you're in the EU or the US regions. For all things Switch, all the time, keep it Switch Up. Cheers guys, see ya!